A reading from Matthew. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, Jesus came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come out to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink, crying out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught Peter, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped Jesus, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." 10 days ago, the kids and I pushed our kayaks off a boat landing near Shem Creek, Mount Pleasant, and we began our 4-hour cruise through the marsh. Now, all of us are competent swimmers. We all had the requisite life preservers on. We had bailers in tow in case one or more of the kayaks took on water during the cruise. We also had multiple bottles of sunscreen so that we wouldn't look like boiled lobsters after our trip. There was also bottles of water and Cliff Bars to keep us nourished and refreshed as we traveled. Everything you need for a kayak adventure. Now, it was a gorgeous morning to be on the water, ideal conditions. The tide was just starting to rise, meaning there was little chance of being pulled out into the harbor. The sky was cloudless, the air was warm, and still the fish and shrimp were jumping in celebration of the relatively calm water. But unfortunately, I flipped over less than 2 minutes after launch. Looking back, I was anxious that morning, distracted, not as comfortable on the creek as I have been in the past, questioning my ability and the sturdiness of my gear. Frankly, I was afraid. When an early misstroke with my paddle had me careening off course under the Shem Creek Bridge, I panicked. I got too high in my boat. I smacked into the pylons and went airborne for a second before crashing into the creek like a blue whale. A nearby paddler snickered as I came to the surface. "It's always the big guys," I heard him say. A little jab to deepen the cuts in my wounded ego and the pervasiveness of my self-doubt. Why did you doubt? In my opinion, this little query marks the most intriguing moment in today's gospel text. Why did you doubt? Jesus asks Peter as he pulls him from the choppy sea that's just beyond the edge of the boat. In the background, the disciples look on astonishingly. After all, a storm's raging. Jesus is walking on water, and big old Peter is crazy enough to give it a try too. Why did you doubt? I think the key to appreciating the significance of this question is to remember what transpired right before the disciples got on the water in the first place. You remember, don't you? They're at a desolate place, a wilderness. Throngs of hungry people. A few loaves and fish, skeptical disciples. But right in the middle of it, Jesus has made a meal. He meets the hunger of the people with compassion and power. After supper, Matthew tells us Jesus goes off to pray, and the disciples hop into the boat to begin the 8-mile trek to the other side. Now, Matthew points out that the cruise goes sideways from the start. The wind rises. The white caps slap the sides of the craft. Foam and mist fill the disciples' noses and throats with the aroma of sea life and the stench of fear. While all the disciples have robust experience handling this sort of bad weather on open water, their skill seems to mean nothing on this particular cruise. Is the wind too strong? Are the waves too ominous? Maybe it's the fact that Jesus has now appeared out of nowhere, walking on the water in a supernatural display of power and presence. The disciples are terrified, the text says. Disturbed, according to the Greek, shaken to the core. Is it a spirit? A ghost? Cheer up, Jesus says. Don't be afraid. It's me. While most of the disciples are seized up, stiffened by all the disturbing things that are happening, Peter's displaying a bold streak. Trust. Faith. After all, this ghostly figure out on the water is the same guy who took 2 tilapia and 5 barley loaves just yesterday and fed 4,000 or more. Surely Peter remembers this act of power. Lord, if it's you, command me to come out to you on the water. Come on out, Peter. Jesus replies, come on out. And Peter hops over the port side. And at least for a moment or two, he starts to walk like his teacher. It's only after Peter reassesses the situation, the waves, the wind, the terror of it all, that his fear and doubt are stirred up. I'm going under, Jesus. I'm going under. Save me. Like Peter, we vacillate between courage and fear. Between I can't get through this and this storm won't end until it takes me under. Have you walked on water lately? I didn't think so. But I bet many of you, because of forces far beyond your power, have made more than a few leaps of faith in recent months. Do I send my kids back to school in person? Or somehow try to make a go of it at home? Do I dare travel to see the grandkids or my parents? Or in the alternative, do I force myself to become a computer guru so I can connect with them over the internet? Do I hunker down in my current job and risk it not being there in October? Or do I try something new when there are no guarantees? Right now, heading to the family practitioner for a routine exam is a decision more akin to traveling across the Galilee in a storm than driving in light traffic down Fairview Road. The water's so very high right now. The wind and waves are angry. We all know this to be true. Why did you doubt, Peter? I don't hear this question as Jesus is jabbing a disciple for not staying upright for longer than he did. No, this is Jesus saying, when you're swamped, Peter, when you're in over your head, and you will be, don't ever doubt my love for you. Adding insult to injury, I couldn't get back in my kayak after I flipped it. Too much mass and too many people watching. I kicked back to the ramp that Thursday morning with the boat in one hand and my oar in the other. A 50-something-year-old deckhand met me at the ramp. And although I probably outweighed her by 100 pounds, she grabbed my hand and snatched me out of the creek like I was an undersized blue crab on the end of her chicken line. At that moment, I wanted to dart for the minivan and get lost for a while. Well, that wasn't going to happen. "Get back in the kayak," she said with authority. "Loosen up your torso," she commanded as she grabbed my shoulders and reminded me how to counteract the movement of the boat. "You can do this, you know." And she was right. Sometimes we just have to jump in. Take the risks, even when our bodies and our egos are screaming, "Don't do it. This won't end well." Now more than any time I can recall in my own lifetime, each one of us is being called to step deeper into the storm for the good of our families, the church, and the world. We've all had to take some risks in these months and will be asked to take many more. And when we take the plunge, we may walk unimpeded. We may be upright for less than 5 minutes. We may even sink right away. The good news? We're loved by the one who has the power to yank us up and dry us off so that we can do it all over again. Why do you doubt? Amen.